Missionaries spoke vigorously in defence of Maori rights. Foremost among those who vehemently objected to government injustice towards Maori were missionaries Henry Williams and especially Octavius Hadfield.
Other Christian people who protested included Bishop Selwyn and Abraham, and the evangelical layman Sir William Martin, the Chief Justice. Such pro-Māori Christian voices were regarded by the settler public and government as tiresome obstacles to progress, and were resented and disregarded.
In the Taranaki War, the missionaries totally take the side of the Māori. Changes in the Waikato War, but in the Taranaki War, without question, they come in strongly on the side that justice demands that Māori landowning be respected. And so their vision runs right against the desire for an expansion of the Pākehā world.
The wars of the 1860s, with British troops waging war on largely Christianised iwi, seriously damaged the Māori attitude towards Christianity. Not for all, but for many. A humanitarian member of the House of Representatives declared in 1865 that in the war years there had been only, quote, the sword gleaming in the air, while the cross was trampled in the dust. The wars were followed by widespread Māori land loss, confiscations and legislation specifically designed to dispossess Māori of their land. Pākehā Christians in general raised no objection. The missionaries, who certainly objected, felt overwhelmed and worn down and largely abandoned their protests. The historic injustices towards Māori are one of the barriers to Māori accepting the gospel, with Christianity coming to be seen by some Māori as just another aspect of Western colonialism.
The challenge of evangelising Māori today is the fact that there is so much history that has gone on in our country. Some be it good, some be it not. But for myself, as a person who's come to terms with faith in Christ, I find it so difficult to relate to people that Christ is the way, the truth and the life, because all they can see is that it's a white man's gospel and all of the mamai, all of the pain that is associated with that stuff. It is difficult to separate out those two kaupapa. The fact that the gospel came, the fact that the gospel and the messengers brought history into our land, and that history was both amazing, the gospel, and not so amazing, the other things that happened. If we find a way to walk through those challenges, that I think is the future of our faith within Māori communities. Yeah.
You're Sam. Sam's going to come and say a few words.
Kia ora koutou. I think Hokaiho was an example of a reason to gather, that the rangatira, the chiefs, would send out the call. And maybe we got another reason to gather. The concept of the kumara that was carried across the Pacific to be planted in foreign soil with the capacity to grow and to bring sustenance and life to a people group became that symbol of not only origin but of a future. This God-given pre-Christian concept of Io Matua Te Kore, the provider, the creator. The full revelation of Io came in the good news of the gospel. Not only that brought our sense of personal salvation, but collective salvation as a nation, as a people group. And that the offences of history are there within that seed that was planted. The way we deal with the offences of history is there with the seed that was planted. That the only way that we can deal with our human failings and shortcomings, that even in the light of treaties we continue to break, was that Jesus took all of those offences and nailed them to the cross. He took the offence of the white man of the Pākehā. He took the offence of the Māori. He took the offence of the husband against the wife, the parents against their children, and the children against the parents, and he nailed that to the cross. See, the seed of the gospel is the seed of our preparedness to believe that what God did in Christ was enough. That we can't add anything to him to make the gospel more attractive, more beautiful, more complete. And all the annals of history can only tell the stories of our struggle with our humanness. But this kubala seed that's been planted in you and in me is the only hope that we have. But it's going to take your faith and my faith to believe that what God has done in Christ is enough. And then that sets us free. Free to create a different kind of future for your children and grandchildren and my grandchildren. That's based not on our effort to try and deal with those offenses, but it releases us to create and to develop and to innovate a whole new future, so that life in all its fullness becomes yours and mine to enjoy. I hope that these few days will release that among us. That we will go in with even a greater sense, not of trying to drag the burden of blame and guilt, but to reach out into a future that says all that Jesus came for, life in all its fullness, is ours to enjoy in 2011. Amen.
Christianity has made a very significant contribution to New Zealand society generally over the last 200 years. Any assessment of 2 centuries of Christianity in New Zealand has to acknowledge the huge good that has been done. For countless New Zealand Christians, people of all cultures, both individuals and families, there have been incalculable spiritual benefits and blessings of faith and a relationship with God. A faith to live by. A faith to comfort in suffering and in grief. A faith that encouraged and encourages hope, kindness, compassion, honesty, faithfulness, marriage, stable family life, moral character, education and work. How can we possibly discount any of that? That vast amount of good that has come through the gospel embedded in the lives of countless Christian people of New Zealand, of all cultures.
Our faith richly expressed in thousands and thousands of worshipping communities with deep ties of fellowship and intergenerational friendship and nurture.
Over the years, the churches have had a huge role in teaching and shaping younger generations, especially in Sunday schools, Bible classes, youth groups. At the end of the 1950s, at least 60% of children were going to Sunday school, and that's not counting the Catholic children. It was not uncommon at that time for Sunday schools to have several hundred children in them. Some of you will have been part of those Sunday schools. Bible classes. St. John's Bible Class Wellington in 1894, the beginning of the Bible class movement in various church denominations in New Zealand. Christianity has made this huge contribution to the whole of society. Whenever Christian faith has been at its strongest, there's been a powerful leavening effect on society at large, giving New Zealand society a spiritual framework and a moral anchoring. And that leavening effect has never been absent, and it's still not absent. Notwithstanding the growth of secularism and religious pluralism, most of what is just and good about this society, such as values of generosity and an aversion to corruption, can unquestionably be traced back to Christian roots and influences. New Zealand has never been, as the Prime Minister said at the Pike River Memorial thing, New Zealand has never been overly religious. But New Zealand, according to, it's never been an especially or intensely Christian society. But as historian James Bellich points out, that much adherence was not intense does not make it unimportant. And Bellich implies that a shared Christian adherence, however vague, was a key factor binding this country together. We could go on to say that take away the Christian spiritual and ethical underpinnings of this society and it will steadily disintegrate.
In contrast to some societies, the percentage of the New Zealand population regularly attending church has never been higher than about 48% at its peak in 1891. For at least half the New Zealand population, work, rest and recreation have always tugged more strongly than faith or church.
But secular historians are distorting our history when they marginalise the significance of a movement which in any given week directly involved up to half the nation's people, often in profound ways, and which was present and active in every New Zealand community. There's never been a national revival in New Zealand, at least not yet. There have been periods of significant spiritual quickening, such as in 1901 with the visit of R.A. Torrey, and at times in the 1920s, or in the 2 or 3 years before and after the 1959 Billy Graham Crusade, or later with the Pentecostal and charismatic movements. There have been regional revivals, especially in South Otago and North and Southland in the late 19th century, and in some North Island rural areas. And in all periods, and even now, there have been countless particular people, outreaches, ministries, local churches, and outstanding conversions which have powerfully demonstrated the transforming and irrepressible work of the Spirit of God. We could note, for instance, the huge harvest for the kingdom through Andrew Johnston, the blind evangelist, quiet, sincere, compelling, just simply presenting the scriptures, or the deeply spiritual Bible preaching and teaching of William Orange, who from 1930 onwards in effect relaunched an evangelical Anglican expression of the faith in this country and directly inspired at least 50 protégés to enter the ministry.